Ah, Bom dia a todos, bem-vindos à Poesia ao Meio Dia. Nós retomamos novamente com Susan Roy aqui no estúdio e é um grandíssimo prazer, como sempre, ter a Susan nesse programa. Susan, the screen is yours and then we'll start today.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. I am delighted to be back here to join you after a wonderful break in Ireland. It's wonderful to be able to travel again. And while I was at home, I got lots of travel done around our own country, visiting places I hadn't been before. Laura, indeed, is traveling these days. She's in Argentina. And that's a place I still have to visit, but I hope to get there before too long. Argentina is a very interesting place for us as it's home to South America's largest Irish community and actually the world's fifth largest among the Irish diaspora. Well, of course, everybody knows the Irish love to travel. So, thinking about this, I put together a few poems today about traveling, about journeys, destinations, both physical and metaphorical. So, I hope you enjoy my choices. I'll start off with Yeats as usual. Whenever I had it in my head that I was going to go somewhere on a particular day, um, I would sit up in bed and say, I will arise and go now. And that's a line we all knew from school because The Lake Isle of Innisfree is one of the first Yeats poems most people learn. And indeed, it's probably one of his most famous. So I'll start off very simply with this lovely thought about traveling to the peace of the Lake Isle. The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There, midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavements grey. I hear it in the deep heart's core. There's another famous poet in Ireland, a man called John O'Donoghue. He comes from County Galway and he has published many best-selling books and volumes of poetry. He was actually initially ordained a Catholic priest, but he became very involved in writing, and he retired from his public duties as a priest and devoted himself to writing full time. And also to a public life of speaking and advocating for social justice. And he wrote this wonderful poem called For the Traveller. And I think for many of us that are traveling so much these days, it's a very nice way to reflect on our travels. For the Traveller by John O'Donoghue. Every time you leave home, another road takes you into a world you were never in. New strangers on other paths await. New places that have never seen you will startle a little at your entry. Old places that know you well will pretend nothing has changed since your last visit. When you travel, you find yourself alone in a different way, more attentive now to the self you bring along, with a more subtle eye watching you abroad, and how what meets you touches that part of the heart that lies low at home. How you unexpectedly attune to the timbre in some voice, opening in conversation you want to take into where your longing has pressed hard enough inward on some unsaid dark to create a crystal of insight you could not have known you needed to illuminate your way. When you travel, a new silence goes with you. And if you listen, you will hear what your heart would love to say. A journey can become a sacred thing. Make sure before you go to take the time to bless your going forth, to free your heart of ballast so that the compass of your soul might direct you towards the territory of the spirit, where you will discover your hidden life and the urgencies that deserve to claim you. May you travel in an awakened way. Gather wisely into your inner ground, that you may not waste the invitations which wait along the way to transform you. May you travel safely, arrive refreshed, and live your time away to its fullest. Return home more enriched and free to balance the gift of days which call you. My next two poems are by Moya Cannon, very famous Irish poet. She was born in County Donegal, but she now lives in Dublin. And in her work, she reflects on a lot of her main interests of music and history, migration, plus archaeology, geology, and other facets of our long relationship to the earth and the seas. She herself has travelled to Argentina, like you today, Laura. And actually, the Argentinian poet Jorge Fondibrider, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that now right, he has translated a selection of her work into Spanish. And also her work is translated into Portuguese by the Brazilian poet Luci Collin. So today I'm going to read two of her poems for you, starting with one lovely poem called Blue Saxophones, which is set in Buenos Aires. Blue Saxophones by Moya Cannon. In Buenos Aires, the sidewalks are broken, but the trees are tall and blue. Blue like Cézanne's blue picture, which speaks to some still corner of the soul. A quite unnecessary, delicate blue. And the unmended pavements are strewn with a carpet of blue blossoms. And with the bent pennies, the tough leathery purses, which are the seed cases of the jacaranda. A surety, until now, that there would certainly be more and more of this. More tall blue trees in October, singing gratuitously above the dusty pavements of the thousands of blue clustered saxophones. I love that poem. I want to be in Buenos Aires. And as I said, I hope I'm going to get there fairly soon. The next poem by Moya, it's a poem called Hands, and it's actually a reflection on, she's in an airplane traveling home from Argentina, and a thought strikes her, that kind of thought that I'm sure everybody has had when they're in a plane. Oh my God, I'm up here and like I'm completely putting my own life into the hands of somebody else. And she conveys this beautifully in this poem called Hands. It was somewhere over the northeastern coast of Brazil, over Fortaleza, a city of which I know nothing, except that it's full of people, the life of each one a mystery, greater than the Amazon. It was there, as the toy plane on the flight monitor nudged over the equator and veered east towards Marrakesh, that I started to think of hands, of how strange that it is that our lives, the lives of the red-haired girl to my left, the life of the Argentinian boy to my right, my life, and the lives of all the dozing passengers are being carried fast in the dark over the darkened Atlantic. And all of these lives are now being held in the hands of the pilot. And I can think of other hands, hands which hold our lives, the hands of the surgeon, whom I will meet again when I return home, the hands of the black-haired nurse who unwound the birth cord from my neck, the soft hands of my mother, the hands of those others who have loved me, until it seems almost as though this is what a human life is, to be passed from hand to hand, to be borne up improbably over an ocean. I think of that poem a lot when I'm traveling, especially when I'm flying, and I'm thinking about, yes, we are indeed all so dependent on other people and all those very important people in our lives. And we do put our hands in the lives of so many. So we have, there's a lot going on in that poem. When I think about traveling, I've thought about the many times in my life that I've traveled towards someone, towards my family at home in Ireland, or towards coming back here to Brazil, towards my husband, towards all the different people that I often will meet at the end of my journey. And also, of course, I think about those left behind, and like this actual journey, the whole act of traveling is like a rope or a thread between those people, some that we're leaving and some that we're meeting. And especially when you're traveling towards somebody that you love, it's a wonderful feeling when you get there and you know that person has been waiting for you. And that's why I really like this poem, All Legendary Obstacles, by the poet John Montague. John was a bit of a traveller himself. Even though he was born in New York, his parents were Irish. And when they had, of course, emigrated to New York, like so many of the Irish of that time. But during the Great Depression, they fell on such hard times that they actually sent their John and his brother back to Ireland, and he was reared there by aunts and relatives. But later he returned to the States. He studied in both Yale and in Berkeley, before he took up a job with the Irish Times, actually, as a correspondent. And he moved to Paris. And of course, when he was in Paris, he became great friends with Samuel Beckett. But eventually, he returned to Ireland and he settled in Cork. And he wrote this wonderful poem. Again, as I said, the narrator in the poem is reunited with his lover who's traveling to meet him. And I just think he builds a beautiful picture in this poem. All Legendary Obstacles by John Montague. All legendary obstacles lay between us. The long imaginary plain, the monstrous rook of mountains, and swinging across the night, flooding the Sacramento, San Joaquin, the hissing drift of winter rain. All day I waited, shifting nervously from station to bar, as I saw another train sail by, the San Francisco Chief or the Golden Gate, water dripping from the great flanged wheels. At midnight, you came, pale above the Negro porter's lamp. I was too blind with rain and doubt to speak, but reached from the platform until our chilled hands met. You had been travelling for days with an old lady who marked a neat circle in the glass with her glove to watch us move into the darkness, kissing, still unable to speak. Of course, there's also the sad side of those who are left behind. When people move, when people emigrate, when people go to live in other countries. I often think about my parents when I left many years ago and went off to Sudan as a young volunteer, and how in those days they didn't really ever know when they'd hear from us again or see us again. And things are so much different today with all the wonderful technology we have to stay in touch. But even so, you do feel far away from your loved ones, especially in my own case now with my daughter who's in Vancouver in Canada, and my son who has just moved to Cairns in Australia. And my youngest is in Ireland, so actually we're all over the place, all over, representing 3 or 4 different continents in our small family. But we do, actually, it's a little bit harder to get in touch with people now because the time differences make you feel very far away. Evan Boland, a poet who we have talked about her poetry before during this time, she wrote this lovely poem called The Lost Land. She's also talking about, in the poem, she has 2 daughters who have left, but also all those who have left, all those who have stayed, all those who have lost their homes, but think of them. And she invokes this wonderful state of missing and yet owning. So I'll just go ahead and read this poem for you. The Lost Land by Evan Boland. I have 2 daughters. They are all I ever wanted from the earth, or almost all. I also wanted one piece of ground, one city trapped by hills, one urban river, an island in its element. So I could say, mine, my own, and mean it. Now they are grown up and far away, and memory itself has become an emigrant, wandering in a place where love dissembles itself as landscape, where the hills are the colours of a child's eyes, where my children are distances, horizons. At night, on the edge of sleep, I can see the shore of Dublin Bay, its rocky sweep and its granite pier. Is this, I say, how they must have seen it, backing out on the mail boat at twilight, shadows falling on everything they had to leave and would love forever? And then I imagine myself at the landward rail of that boat, searching for the last sight of a hand. I see myself on the underworld side of that water, the darkness coming in fast, saying all the names I know for a lost land. Ireland, absence, daughter. Living in Ireland, one of the things I did regularly was drive from Dublin down to Mayo. I always called it going home, even though my home with my own family was in Dublin at that time. But for me, Mayo was always home. And our wonderful poet, Paul Durcan, a great friend of Brazil, has written this lovely poem called Going Home to Mayo. It's set in the winter of 1949. And I can still feel that journey home, especially in winter with the rain beating down on the car and going through the towns and getting nearer and nearer. It wasn't an easy journey in those days, down from Dublin to Mayo. Going Home to Mayo, winter 1949, by Paul Durcan. Leaving behind us the alien foreign city of Dublin, my father drove us through the night in an old Ford Anglia, his 5-year-old son in the seat beside him, the Rexine seat of red leatherette, and a yellow moon peered in through the windscreen. "Daddy, Daddy," I cried, "pass out the moon." But no matter how hard he drove, he could not pass out the moon. Each town we passed through was another milestone, and their names were magic passwords into eternity. Kilcock, Kinnegad, Strokestown, Elphin, Termonbarry, Tulsk, Ballahadreen, Ballavary. Now we were in Mayo, and the next stop was Thurlock, the village of Thurlock in the heart of Mayo. And my father's mother's house, all oil lamps and women, and my bedroom over the public bar below. And in the morning, cattle cries and cock crows. Life's seemingly seamless garment, gorgeously rent by their screeches and bellowings. And in the evenings, I walked with my father in the high grass down by the river, talking with him, an unheard of thing in the city. But home was not home, and the moon could be no more outflanked than the daylight nightmare of Dublin City. Back down along the canal, we chugged into the city, and each locked gate told our mutual doom. And railings and palings and asphalt and traffic lights and blocks of so-called new tenements, thousands of crosses of loneliness planted in the narrowing grave of the life of the father, in the wide, wide cemetery of the boy's childhood. The last poem that I'm going to share with you today is written by Michael D. Higgins, the President of Ireland, who himself is an established poet and has published, I think, 4 volumes of poetry. I was drawn to this poem because of its title, Take Care. Those words are so often spoken by Irish people, especially when we're saying goodbye, when we're embarking on a journey. My mother would always say, goodbye now and take care. I especially like the bit in the poem where the poet talks about the tree is your teacher. So we can see how the trees bend and flex in the wind, but deep roots, more firm from experience, keep them rooted. So even though we may travel far and wide, we still have our roots at home. And I think this is a really reassuring idea. Also just in the way that, we don't always have to be on the move either. We can take a little break even from this so-called journey of life and take some time out to re-energize and then get back into the journey and into the whole movement of it all. So, Take Care by Michael D. Higgins. In the journey to the light, the dark moments should not threaten. Belief requires that you hold steady. Bend, if you will, with the wind. The tree is your teacher. Roots at once more firm from experience in the soil made fragile. Your gentle dew will come, and a stirring of power to go on towards the space of sharing. In the misery of the I, in rage, it is easy to cry out against all others. But to weaken is to die in the misery of knowing, the journey abandoned towards the sharing of all hope and cries is the loss of all we know, of the divine reclaimed for our shared humanity. Hold firm. Take care. Come home together. So that's my last poem for the moment. I'm going to hand you back now to Laura, and as usual, we have a little bit of music to finish up our broadcast today. I hope you've enjoyed it. The song is a short song called The Journey, sung by 2 very favourite singers of mine, Liam Clancy and Tommy Macomb. And I hope that everything goes well for you on your own journeys, your own travels, if you're setting off anywhere today, or if you're coming home, or if you're going to be reunited with somebody. Let's hope it all goes well for you. So Laura, are we ready to play the music? I think we are. Hopefully it's going to work. Sometimes we do have a little technical difficulties. Is it coming, Laura?
Yes.
Great.
Glass is dry and done, and I must go and leave this town before the rising of the sun. And and long's the road, and far's the mile, before I rest my soul again, with girls that weep and girls that smile, and all the words and ways of men. For some that but wander to the journey's end, nor take a girl to be a bride, nor keep a man to be a friend. And when I'm done with wandering, I will sit beside the road and weep for all the songs I did not sing, and promises I did not keep.
Thank you very much for coming. Hope we'll see you all again very soon. Good night, safe home, God bless.